Daniel Reed stood in Lena Ward's doorway at 9:47 on a Thursday night, staring at two pink lines that would unravel everything they'd both built in careful isolation. She was 32, brilliant and untouchable, a senior partner who could end careers with a signature. He was 30, a single father who'd learned to carry weight without complaint, climbing through talent alone in a firm that worshipped hierarchy. The pregnancy test trembled slightly in her steady hand. When he asked if the child was his, Lena looked past him into the hallway, then back at his face. "Close the door, Daniel," she said quietly. That choice, that single moment of acknowledgement, marked the collision of their private past with their carefully separated lives, and neither of them understood yet how much it would cost them both. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The hallway behind Daniel was empty, but he pulled the door shut anyway, his hand lingering on the knob longer than necessary. The click of the latch seemed louder than it should have been. Lena set the test on the kitchen counter with the same precision she used signing contracts, then crossed her arms, not defensively, but as if holding something fragile inside herself together. "When did you know?" Daniel asked. His voice was low, the kind of careful tone he used with his daughter Maya when she woke from nightmares. "Tuesday," Lena said. "I took 3 tests, all positive." "And you're sure it's the retreat?" she interrupted. "January. There's been no one else." Daniel exhaled slowly, remembering that weekend in fragments. The executive lodge buried in Vermont snow, the heating system that failed at midnight, the supply closet where they'd found emergency blankets, and each other in the kind of exhausted intimacy that felt inevitable and impossible at once. He remembered her breath against his neck, the shocking warmth of her hands, the way neither of them spoke about it afterward because speaking would make it real, would make it a choice instead of an accident born from cold and isolation. "How far along?" he asked. 8 weeks? Maybe 9? I have an appointment Monday to confirm." 8 weeks. 2 months of her knowing her body was changing while he sat 3 floors below her office, reviewing case files and attending meetings where she barely looked at him. 2 months of silence that suddenly made terrible sense. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked carefully. Lena's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a flash of something raw before the control returned. "I'm keeping it," she said. "That's not negotiable." "I wasn't suggesting—" "I know what you were asking, Daniel. I'm 32. I've spent a decade building a career that eats people alive. I don't have time for this, I don't have space for this, and I definitely don't have the setup for this." She gestured vaguely at her immaculate apartment, all clean lines and strategic lighting. "But I'm keeping it anyway." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood that determination, had felt it himself 5 years ago when Maya's mother left a note on the kitchen table and disappeared into a life that didn't include diapers or preschool pickups or the weight of someone else's needs before your own. "Okay," he said. "Then we figure it out." "We?" Lena repeated, and there was something sharp in the word, not quite challenge, but close. "You think I'm walking away from my kid?" Daniel asked quietly. "That's not who I am." "I know exactly who you are," Lena said, and for the first time that night her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You're the guy who leaves work at 5:30 no matter what crisis is happening because your daughter has a recital or needs help with homework. You're the one who turned down the Singapore transfer because it would mean uprooting her support system. You're reliable, Daniel. Steady. That's not the problem." "Then what is?" Lena moved to the window, looking out at the city lights scattered below like fallen stars. "The problem is I'm your boss, Daniel. Not directly, but structurally. I'm a senior partner. You're a mid-level associate. If this gets out, if anyone finds out we were involved—" "We weren't involved," Daniel interrupted. "It was one night, one mistake." "One night that's about to become a whole person," Lena said, turning back to face him. "And when that person exists, people are going to do math. They're going to count backward from the birth date, and they're going to land on the retreat, and then they're going to start asking questions we don't have good answers for." Daniel felt the weight of it settling over him like snow accumulation, silent, gradual, suffocating. "So what are you suggesting?" I don't know yet, Lena admitted. And hearing her say those words, hearing Lena Ward, who always had a plan, always had 3 contingencies prepared, admit uncertainty made Daniel's chest tighten with something close to fear. I need time to think. I need to figure out how to do this without destroying everything I've built. And me? Daniel asked. What am I supposed to do? Keep being exactly who you are, Lena said. Go home to Maya. Show up at work Monday morning like nothing's changed. Give me space to work this out. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being part of whatever planning she was doing, but he recognized the look on her face. It was the same expression she wore in depositions, in board meetings, in any situation where she needed absolute control to function. Pushing her now would only make her retreat further. Okay, he said finally. But Lena, I meant what I said. I'm not walking away from this. From our kid. Whatever we have to figure out, we figure it out together. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or relief. But it was gone before he could name it. She nodded once, a sharp acknowledgement, then moved to the door, holding it open in clear dismissal. Daniel paused in the threshold, wanting to say something more, something that would bridge the vast distance between 2 pink lines and actual parenthood, between a mistake and a family. But the words wouldn't come, so he just nodded and stepped into the hallway, hearing the door close softly behind him. The drive home took 40 minutes through light traffic, but Daniel barely registered the turns. His mind kept circling back to Lena's apartment, to the careful way she'd held herself together, to the fear he'd seen beneath her control. He thought about Maya, asleep in her bed with her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, oblivious to the fact that her carefully balanced world was about to shift on its axis. His daughter was 5 years old, bright and stubborn, and deeply sensitive to change. When he'd rearranged the furniture in her room last month, she'd cried for an hour, convinced that nothing would ever feel right again. How was he supposed to explain a new sibling, a new person in their carefully constructed life, when he barely understood it himself? The house was dark when he arrived, just the porch light burning like a beacon. Mrs. Chen from next door had agreed to stay late, and she met him at the door with her usual warm smile that faded when she saw his face. Everything okay, Daniel? Long day, he said, which was true if inadequate. Thanks for staying. Maya's been asleep since 8:30. No problems. She gathered her knitting and purse, pausing at the door. You look tired, dear. Make sure you rest. After she left, Daniel stood in the quiet house, listening to the familiar sounds of settling wood and distant traffic. He checked on Maya out of habit, finding her exactly as he'd imagined, curled on her side, elephant clutched close, breathing soft and even. In sleep, she looked impossibly young, vulnerable in ways that made his chest ache. He sat carefully on the edge of her bed, not wanting to wake her but needing to be close, needing to ground himself in this reality before confronting the one that was coming. Another child. Another person who would need him completely, who would reshape his life around their existence. The thought should have terrified him, and part of it did. But underneath the fear was something else, something almost like longing. Maya stirred, her eyes opening halfway. Dad. Hey, Bug. Go back to sleep. You're home late, she mumbled, already drifting again. I know. I'm sorry. It's okay. Love you. Love you too, Maya. She was asleep again before he finished speaking, but Daniel stayed there a while longer, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breathing. Whatever complications were coming, whatever impossible situations he and Lena had to navigate, this was the center of it. This was what mattered. Protecting his kids, both of them, and giving them the stability he'd promised himself he'd provide when Maya's mother left. Finally, he stood, tucking the blanket more securely around Maya's shoulders, and headed to his own room. Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight, he knew, but that was fine. He'd learned a long time ago how to function on insufficient rest and excessive worry. It was practically a single parent's job description. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Daniel dropped Maya at school, endured her lengthy explanation of why her teacher was wrong about the plural of moose, and arrived at the firm by 8:15, his usual time. The building was glass and steel in deliberate intimidation, 60 stories of legal expertise stacked vertically, with the most powerful names occupying the highest floors. Lena's office was on 57. Daniel worked on 54. He'd been with Morrison, Kent, and Associates for 4 years, brought in as a junior associate and promoted twice through a combination of genuine talent and relentless work ethic. He specialized in corporate defense, protecting companies from liability with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that made him valuable. Not flashy, not a rainmaker, but reliable. Steady. The same words Lena had used Thursday night, though he wasn't sure if she'd meant them as compliment or indictment. His desk was organized chaos, files stacked precisely, coffee going cold in its usual spot, sticky notes arranged in a system only he understood. He'd just pulled up his case notes when his phone buzzed with a message from Lena. Conference room C, 10 minutes, come alone. Daniel's stomach tightened. Conference room C was small, rarely used, tucked into a corner of the 56th floor where casual observation was unlikely, the kind of place you went when you needed privacy. He took the stairs, partly for the extra minutes to compose himself, and partly because the elevator would have felt too confined. When he arrived, Lena was already there, standing by the window with her back to the door. She wore charcoal gray, severely tailored, her dark hair pulled back in the kind of bun that suggested absolute control. Nothing about her posture suggested vulnerability, but Daniel had learned to read the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness around her eyes. "Close the door," she said without turning. Daniel did, then waited. Lena had called this meeting, he'd let her set the terms. Finally, she turned to face him, and he was struck again by how beautiful she was. Not in the soft way people usually meant the word, but in something sharper, more architectural. Beautiful the way a knife was beautiful, all clean lines and purpose. "I saw my doctor this morning," Lena said. 10 weeks, confirmed, due date in late October. October, 6 months away. Not enough time and too much time simultaneously. How are you feeling?" Daniel asked, because he didn't know what else to say. "Nauseous, exhausted, furious at my body for the inconvenient timing." Her mouth quirked in something too bitter to be a smile. "But physically healthy, according to the tests." "That's good." "Is it?" Lena crossed her arms, that familiar defensive gesture. "Daniel, I've been thinking about this all weekend, about what happens next, how we handle this, and I keep coming back to the same problem. The firm." "The firm," she confirmed. "If this gets out, if anyone realizes you're the father, they'll assume the worst. They'll assume I used my position, that there was coercion or favoritism or a pattern of inappropriate behavior. They'll destroy both our reputations, but especially yours." "Why especially mine?" "Because you're the subordinate," Lena said bluntly. "Because the narrative will be that you either took advantage of an opportunity or were taken advantage of, and either way you become the victim or the villain. Your career here ends." Daniel felt anger flash hot in his chest. "So what are you suggesting? We hide it? Pretend the kid doesn't exist?" "Don't be absurd," Lena snapped. "I'm suggesting we're strategic. We keep this private until I can secure certain protections. I'm a senior partner. I have equity. I have leverage. I can negotiate terms that protect you, but I need time to do it right." "Protect me how?" "Transfer you to a different division. Create separation in the reporting structure. Make sure that when this becomes public, and it will become public eventually, there's no appearance of impropriety." She paused, something uncertain crossing her face. "Unless you'd rather leave entirely. Find something at another firm." The suggestion hit harder than it should have. "You want me gone?" "That's not what I said." "You're offering me an exit," Daniel interrupted. "A clean break where you can say the father's not in the picture professionally, where it's just you and your pregnancy and no uncomfortable questions about how it happened." "I'm offering you a choice," Lena said, and her voice was tight now, controlled in a way that suggested she was working hard to stay calm. "This situation is impossible, Daniel. There's no version where we both keep our jobs and our reputations intact while actively co-parenting. Something has to give. And you've decided it should be my career." "I've decided nothing," Lena said sharply. "I'm trying to think 5 steps ahead, which is what I do, what I'm good at. I'm trying to find a path through this that doesn't destroy us both." Daniel took a breath, forcing himself to step back from the anger. She wasn't wrong. The power imbalance was real, the optics were terrible, and the firm's HR policies were designed exactly to prevent situations like theirs. But hearing her talk about strategy and transfers and protection made everything feel clinical, transactional, when the reality was a child who would need both of them. "I'm not leaving," he said quietly. "I'm not transferring divisions or finding another firm or making this easier by disappearing. That kid, our kid, deserves better than a father who runs when things get complicated." Something shifted in Lena's expression, the armor cracking just slightly. "Even if staying cost you everything you've built here?" "I've already lost everything once," Daniel said. "When Maya's mom left. When I had to rebuild my entire life around single parenthood. I know what that costs. I'm not doing it to another kid." Lena looked at him for a long moment, and Daniel saw the calculation happening behind her eyes, the weighing of risks and benefits and impossible choices. Finally, she nodded just once. "Okay," she said. "Then we do this together. But Daniel, you need to understand what we're walking into. The politics in this firm are vicious. If someone finds out before we're ready, before we have protections in place, they will use it as a weapon. Against you, against me, against both of us." "Then we make sure no one finds out," Daniel said, though even as he spoke the words, he knew how naive they sounded. Lena's expression suggested she knew it too. "We try," she said, "but you need to be prepared for the possibility that we fail." For 3 weeks, they maintained the fiction. At work, Lena was distant and professional, their interactions limited to necessary project discussions conducted in public spaces with witnesses. Outside work, they met carefully. Her apartment, late evenings after Maya was asleep, brief conversations about doctor's appointments and insurance, and the 1,000 practical details that pregnancy demanded. Daniel learned that Lena hated ginger ale, but it was the only thing that helped her nausea. That she was already reading parenting books with the same intensity she brought to case law. That she'd started looking at apartments with extra bedrooms, though she hadn't told her family yet because they were complicated in ways she wasn't ready to explain. He told her about Maya's current obsession with marine biology, about the challenges of finding childcare that accommodated his unpredictable schedule, about his fear that he was somehow failing both his children by trying to be present for them separately. They were careful. They were strategic. And they almost made it work. The problem was Adrian Wolfe. Adrian was a senior executive, not quite partner level, but politically connected, the kind of person who accumulated power through favors and information rather than talent. He'd been at the firm for 15 years, long enough to know everyone's vulnerabilities, and he'd made it his business to notice things others missed. Like the way Daniel left the building at odd hours on Thursday nights, like the fact that Lena had scheduled multiple medical appointments during work hours, something she'd never done before, like the subtle changes in her appearance, the loosening of her usual tailored suits, the fatigue she couldn't quite hide behind makeup. Adrian collected these observations the way some people collected stamps, with methodical precision and unclear purpose. He didn't act immediately because he didn't need to. Information was more valuable when deployed strategically, when it could do maximum damage. He waited until the perfect moment. It came on a Wednesday in late April. The firm was hosting a major donor event, the kind of evening where appearances mattered more than substance, where clients and investors mingled with attorneys in a carefully choreographed performance of success and stability. Daniel hadn't planned to attend. These events weren't mandatory for associates, and he preferred spending evenings with Maya, but his supervising partner had insisted, something about showing commitment and building relationships. So he'd arranged for Mrs. Chen to stay late, put on the suit he saved for depositions, and arrived at the hotel ballroom with 40 minutes to spare. Lena was already there, of course, holding court near the bar with a circle of senior partners and their carefully vetted guests. She wore midnight blue, elegant and severe, and if you didn't know to look for it, you'd never notice the barely perceptible swell of her stomach, the way she held herself slightly differently than she had 3 months ago. But Adrian noticed. Adrian was watching from across the room with the patient attention of a predator who'd spotted weakness. Daniel felt it before he understood it, that prickling awareness that something was wrong. He found Adrian's gaze and held it, reading the calculation there, the cold assessment. Then Adrian smiled, thin and knowing, and Daniel's stomach dropped. He started moving toward Lena, weaving through clusters of conversation, but Adrian was faster. He intercepted her as she broke away from the partners, stepping into her path with perfect timing. "Lena," Adrian said warmly, loud enough for nearby people to hear, "you look radiant this evening. Pregnancy suits you." The room didn't stop exactly, but conversations faltered, attention shifting subtly toward them. Lena's expression went absolutely still, her eyes locking onto Adrian with the kind of focus she usually reserved for hostile witnesses. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Oh, come now," Adrian said, all false warmth and theatrical surprise. "Surely you weren't planning to hide it much longer? You're what, 3 months along? 4? He glanced around at the gathered faces, playing to his audience. "We should be celebrating. A senior partner starting a family. That's wonderful news." Daniel had reached them by now, close enough to see the fury in Lena's eyes, the way her hands had clenched into fists at her sides. "Adrian," she said carefully, "this is neither the time nor the place." "For honesty," Adrian interrupted, "I disagree. I think it's exactly the time. After all, we're all family here at Morrison Kent, aren't we? We should know when one of our own is expanding her family." His gaze shifted to Daniel, acknowledgement and threat combined. "I'm sure the father is thrilled." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around them, Daniel could feel the attention sharpening, people putting pieces together, making assumptions. Lena's face had gone pale, her control slipping just enough to show the rage beneath. "This conversation is over," she said flatly. "Is it?" Adrian tilted his head, mock curiosity. "Because I think there are questions that deserve answers. Questions about timeline, about propriety, about whether certain policies were followed. That's enough," Daniel heard himself say, his voice louder than intended. "Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Leave her alone." Adrian's smile widened. "Ah, Daniel, always so protective. It's admirable, really. Though one wonders if that protective instinct started before or after the pregnancy began. The implication was clear, deliberate, calculated to cause maximum damage. Around them, phones were appearing, people documenting the confrontation with the casual cruelty of those who smelled scandal. Lena took a step toward Adrian, and for a moment Daniel thought she might actually hit him. But she caught herself, visibly pulling back from that edge, and when she spoke her voice was ice over steel. "You've made a terrible mistake," she said quietly, "and you're going to regret it." Then she turned and walked away, her spine straight, her head high, leaving Daniel and Adrian and 50 witnesses to process what had just happened. Adrian watched her go, his expression satisfied. Then he looked at Daniel, and there was something almost pitying in his eyes. "You should have been more careful," he said softly. "Both of you should have." Daniel wanted to respond, wanted to say something cutting or defensive, but the words wouldn't come. Because Adrian was right. They hadn't been careful enough. And now the door they'd tried so hard to keep closed had been kicked wide open, and everyone could see what was on the other side. By Thursday morning, the rumors had metastasized into something unstoppable. Daniel arrived at work to find his access badge disabled, a terse email directing him to HR waiting in his inbox. The message was professionally vague, but the meaning was clear. He was being suspended pending investigation into violations of workplace conduct policies. He stood in the lobby, badge in hand, unable to pass the security turnstiles, and felt the weight of it crushing down on him. 4 years of work, of proving himself, of building something stable for Maya, all of it potentially gone because of one night and one vindictive man's need to weaponize private information. His phone buzzed, a text from Lena. "Don't respond to anything. I'm handling this." But how could she handle it when she was the other half of the problem? When anything she did to protect him would only confirm the worst assumptions about their relationship? Daniel left the building, drove home in a daze, and sat in his driveway trying to figure out how to explain to his 5-year-old daughter why Daddy wasn't going to work anymore. Inside, his phone rang. Not Lena this time, but his supervising partner, the one who'd insisted he attend the donor event. "Daniel," the voice said, professionally sympathetic, "I'm sorry it came to this. But you understand we have to take these allegations seriously." "What allegations?" Daniel asked. That I had a relationship with a colleague. That's not against policy. A relationship with a senior partner, the voice corrected. The power dynamics raise serious questions. The timing raises serious questions. We need to investigate fully before making any decisions about your future here. And in the meantime, I'm suspended without pay. A pause. That's standard procedure. Of course it is, Daniel said, and ended the call. He sat there in the quiet car, in his quiet driveway, in his quiet neighborhood where nothing dramatic ever happened, and tried to figure out how everything had fallen apart so quickly. 3 weeks ago, he'd had a job, a reputation, a future. Now he had accusations and suspensions and the growing certainty that Adrian Wolfe had won exactly what he wanted, the destruction of 2 careers and the satisfaction of being the one who caused it. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Lena. Trust me, please. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. Trust. Such a simple word for something so complicated. But what choice did he have? They'd closed the door together that first night. They'd have to open it together now, whatever the cost. He just hoped the price wasn't more than either of them could afford to pay. That evening, Daniel picked up Maya from school and took her to their favorite pizza place, the one with the terrible arcade games and the massive fish tank built into the wall. She chattered happily about her day, about the substitute teacher who let them have extra recess, about the complicated social dynamics of kindergarten friendships. He let her talk, grateful for the distraction, for the reminder that his world was bigger than work drama and corporate politics. Dad, Maya said suddenly, looking up from her cheese slice. Are you sad? Daniel blinked, caught off guard. What makes you think that? You have your sad face, the one you get when bills come or when Mrs. Chen can't babysit. She studied him with the unnerving perceptiveness children sometimes displayed. Did something bad happen? He could lie, should lie, probably, protect her from complications she was too young to understand. But he'd promised himself when her mother left that he wouldn't hide truth from her, wouldn't pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Work is complicated right now, he said carefully. Some people are upset about some choices I made, and I have to figure out how to fix it. Can you fix it? I don't know yet, Bug. Maya considered this, taking another bite of pizza. Then she reached across the table and patted his hand with her small, slightly greasy fingers. It's okay, Dad. You're good at fixing things. The simple faith in her voice made Daniel's throat tight. He squeezed her hand gently, holding on to that trust like a lifeline. Thanks, Maya. You're welcome. Can I have more quarters for the games? He gave her the quarters, watched her run toward the flashing lights and electronic music, and pulled out his phone. Still nothing from Lena beyond that last text. He wanted to call her, wanted to hear her voice and know that she was okay, that they were okay, but he didn't know if that would help or make things worse. Instead, he opened his email and began drafting his resignation letter, just in case. Just to be prepared for the possibility that there was no way forward at Morrison Kent, that the investigation would conclude exactly what Adrian intended it to conclude, and he'd need to leave with whatever dignity he could salvage. He was 3 paragraphs in when his phone rang. Not Lena this time, someone else entirely. Daniel Reed? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. My name is Catherine Mills. I'm with the firm's Independent Ethics Committee. I'm calling to inform you that a formal investigation has been opened regarding allegations of misconduct involving yourself and senior partner Lena Ward. A pause. I'll need you to come in for an interview Friday morning, 9 o'clock. Can you make that time? Daniel watched Maya at the arcade. Her whole face lit up with joy over some simple victory. I'll be there. Good. And Mr. Reed, it would be in your best interest to bring legal representation. The call ended. Daniel sat there holding his phone, feeling the last pieces of his professional life crumbling around him. Legal representation. Formal investigation. Words that belonged in other people's stories, not his. But this was his story now. His and Lena's and their unborn child's. The door was wide open, and everyone could see inside, and all he could do was step through it and hope something worth saving waited on the other side. Maya fell asleep on the drive home, her head tilted against the car seat, her stuffed elephant clutched loosely in one hand. Daniel carried her inside, tucked her into bed, still wearing her pizza-stained shirt, and stood in her doorway watching her breathe. The house felt too quiet around him, full of spaces where worry could expand unchecked. His phone lit up on the kitchen counter. This time it was Lena, finally calling instead of texting. "Are you alone?" she asked without preamble. "Maya's asleep. What's happening?" "I met with the ethics committee this afternoon," Lena said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "They've opened a full investigation. They want access to my calendar, my emails, any communication between us going back 18 months. Catherine Mills called me too. I have an interview Friday morning." "Don't go," Lena said sharply. "Not without a lawyer. Daniel, they're building a case that I coerced you, that there was a pattern of inappropriate behavior. Adrian fed them just enough to make it look credible." Daniel leaned against the counter, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we were both at the retreat. That what happened was consensual. That there was no coercion or favoritism or ongoing relationship at work." She paused, and he heard something crack in her control. "They didn't believe me. Because you're a senior partner, and I'm not. Because the optics are terrible, and Adrian's been very careful about how he framed this. He didn't make direct accusations. He just asked questions, raised concerns, suggested impropriety in ways that are hard to defend against." Lena's breath came out harsh. "He's smarter than I gave him credit for. So what do we do?" "I'm calling in every favor I have," Lena said. "I've contacted 3 board members who owe me, and I'm demanding an independent investigation instead of an internal one. Something that can't be manipulated by Adrian's connections." "Will they agree to that?" "They don't have a choice. I'm a senior partner with equity. I have leverage they can't ignore, and I'm using all of it." Her voice softened slightly. "But Daniel, you need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better. The investigation will be invasive. They'll interview everyone we've ever worked with, scrutinize every interaction. Your reputation will take damage even if we're cleared." Daniel thought about Maya sleeping upstairs, about the second child growing inside Lena, about the life he'd built through sheer determination after everything fell apart the first time. "I know," he said quietly. "But what else can we do? Walk away and let Adrian win? Some people would say that's the smart play. Those people don't have kids depending on them." Lena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was rough with something that might have been gratitude or grief. "I'm sorry I got you into this." "We got into it together," Daniel corrected. "We'll get out of it together." "You're very certain about that." "I'm certain that giving up isn't an option." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "How are you feeling? Physically, I mean." "Tired, nauseous, furious." A breath. "The baby's fine, according to the last checkup. Heartbeat strong, measurements normal. Due dates confirmed for October 23rd. October 23rd. A specific date now, a real deadline approaching whether they were ready or not. "That's good," Daniel said. "That's really good." "Is it?" "Because right now it feels like I'm watching everything I've built collapse while growing a person who's going to need stability I can't provide." "You're the most stable person I know," Daniel said honestly. "You're just scared." "That's allowed." Lena laughed, short and bitter. "Scared? Yes. That's one word for it." Another pause. "I should go. I have calls to make, people to pressure. But Daniel, thank you for not running." "Where would I run to?" "Anywhere that isn't the center of a corporate scandal." "Too late for that now." He heard her smile through the phone, faint but real. "Yes, I suppose it is. Good night, Daniel." "Good night." The call ended. Daniel stood in his kitchen, looking at the calendar on the wall where Maya's school events were marked in bright colors, where his work schedule used to fill the weekday squares, where October 23rd was still just another blank date waiting to be filled. He picked up a pen and wrote carefully in that distant square, "Baby arrives." Then he went to bed and didn't sleep at all. Friday morning came too quickly. Daniel dropped Maya at school early, her cheerful goodbye ringing in his ears as he drove downtown to meet the lawyer Lena had insisted on hiring for him. The attorney was a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to his neighbor, who specialized in employment law and had a reputation for being ruthless when necessary. She met him in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the firm's building, already reviewing a file when he arrived. "Daniel Reed?" She looked up, assessing him quickly. "Sit. We have 20 minutes before your interview and a lot to cover." Daniel sat. Sarah pushed a legal pad across the table. "Write down everything that happened at the retreat. Exact sequence, exact timing, who initiated what. Leave nothing out, no matter how embarrassing." "They're going to ask about that?" "They're going to ask about everything. Your job is to answer truthfully, but minimally. Don't volunteer information. Don't speculate about what Lena was thinking or feeling. Don't offer opinions about workplace dynamics." She tapped the pad. "Right. I'll review while you do." For the next 15 minutes, Daniel wrote out the night in the supply closet in clinical detail that felt nothing like the actual experience. The broken heating, the emergency blankets, the way exhaustion and cold had blurred into something that felt inevitable in the moment and impossible to explain afterward. He tried to be honest without being graphic, factual without being cold. It felt inadequate on the page. Sarah read it twice, her expression giving nothing away. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, this is workable. The key points. Consensual, isolated incident, no prior relationship, no subsequent favoritism. You stick to those facts, you'll be fine. And if they don't believe me? Then they don't believe you, and we escalate. But right now, our job is to make this as boring and unremarkable as possible. No drama, no conspiracy, just 2 adults who made a choice and are dealing with the consequences responsibly." She closed the file. "One more thing. Adrian Wolf will have people in that room. Maybe not physically, but his influence will be there. Don't react to provocative questions. Don't defend Lena. Just state facts and let them draw their own conclusions." "That doesn't feel like enough." "It's not about feelings," Sarah said bluntly. "It's about creating a record that can withstand scrutiny. Trust the process." Trust. That word again, demanding faith he wasn't sure he had. They walked to the building together. Sarah showed her credentials at security and accompanied him upstairs to a conference room on 58, 1 floor above Lena's office. 3 people waited inside. Catherine Mills from the Ethics Committee, a man Daniel didn't recognize who introduced himself as outside counsel, and someone from HR whose name he immediately forgot. The interview lasted 2 hours. They asked about the retreat, about his relationship with Lena before and after, about his career trajectory, and any projects they'd worked on together. They asked if he felt pressured to maintain silence, if he'd received any professional benefits that might be connected to the relationship, if he understood the firm's policies regarding workplace conduct. Daniel answered each question carefully, sticking to Sarah's guidance, providing facts without elaboration. Yes, they'd been at the retreat. Yes, what happened was consensual. No, there was no ongoing relationship at work. No, he'd never received inappropriate favoritism. Yes, he understood the pregnancy was a consequence they were both taking responsibility for. Catherine Mills took notes with mechanical precision, her expression neutral. The outside counsel asked more pointed questions, clearly trying to establish a pattern that didn't exist. The HR representative mostly stayed silent, occasionally requesting clarification on dates or details. Through it all, Daniel kept his voice steady, his answers consistent. He didn't defend Lena and didn't attack Adrian. He just told the truth as plainly as he could manage and hoped it would be enough. Finally, Catherine Mills closed her notebook. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. We'll be in touch once we've completed our investigation. In the meantime, your suspension remains in effect pending final determination." "How long will that take?" Sarah asked. "As long as necessary to be thorough," Catherine said, which wasn't an answer at all. Outside, Sarah walked him to the elevator. "You did well. Calm, consistent, credible. That's what we needed." "And now?" "Now we wait. They'll interview Lena separately, probably already have. They'll talk to people who were at the retreat, review communications, build their timeline. If we're lucky, they'll conclude exactly what we told them. 2 adults made a choice, dealt with it privately, and there's no policy violation." "And if we're not lucky?" Sarah's expression was grim. "Then we fight. But let's not borrow trouble yet." Daniel rode the elevator down alone, feeling hollowed out by the precision of the questioning. By the way they'd turned the most intimate night of his recent life into a series of timestamps and bullet points. He walked out of the building into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright, too cheerful for the weight he was carrying. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. How did it go? Survived. You? Same. Waiting now. He wanted to see her, wanted to be in the same room instead of communicating through screens and careful distances. But that impulse was exactly what had gotten them into this situation. Wanting something they shouldn't, taking something that came with consequences they'd underestimated. Instead of responding, Daniel got in his car and drove to Maya's school, arriving an hour before pickup. He sat in the parking lot watching other parents arrive, seeing their normal routines, their uncomplicated lives. A mother with a toddler on her hip, laughing at something on her phone. A father in a suit, probably leaving work early for soccer practice. Simple moments that Daniel had taken for granted before everything got complicated. When Maya emerged from the building, she ran to the car with her usual enthusiasm, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Dad, you're early. Finish my work, Daniel said, which was technically true if you counted unemployment as finishing. Can we go to the park? Sure, Bug. Whatever you want. They spent the afternoon at the playground, Maya racing between swings and slides while Daniel pushed her and caught her and tried to be present in these moments, even as his mind kept circling back to conference rooms and investigations and the uncertain future hanging over all of them. Dad, Maya said eventually, sitting beside him on a bench while she caught her breath. Is the sad thing getting better? Daniel looked at his daughter, at her open face and simple faith that problems could be solved. Not yet, he admitted, but I'm working on it. Do you need help? You help me every day just by being you. Maya considered this seriously. Okay, but if you need actual help, like with homework, I'm pretty good at that. Daniel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I'll keep that in mind. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Daniel cleaned the house thoroughly, took Maya to her swimming lesson, made elaborate breakfasts and simple dinners, all while his phone stayed mostly silent. Lena texted twice, once to say the ethics committee had requested additional documentation, once to ask if he was okay. He answered honestly both times. They'd asked for his personnel file and calendar access. And no, he wasn't okay, but he was managing. Monday morning, Maya went back to school and Daniel faced the alien concept of a weekday with nowhere to be. He tried to be productive, updated his resume, researched other firms, considered what pivoting careers at 30 might look like, but mostly he just felt the weight of waiting, of having no control over outcomes that would determine his entire future. His phone rang at 11. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. Daniel Reed? Speaking. This is Marcus Webb. I'm a board member at Morrison Kent. I'd like to meet with you this afternoon if you're available. Daniel's pulse spiked. Regarding the investigation? Regarding several things. Can you come to my office at 2? It wasn't really a question. I'll be there. Marcus Webb's office wasn't at the firm. It was downtown in a building that housed investment groups and private equity firms. The man himself was in his 60s, distinguished in that effortless way that came from old money and older connections. He stood when Daniel entered, offering his hand with a firm grip. Thank you for coming on short notice. Please, sit. Daniel sat. Marcus moved to a small bar cart, poured 2 glasses of water without asking, and handed one over before settling into the chair across from him. I've been reviewing your file, Marcus said without preamble. 4 years at Morrison Kent, 2 promotions, consistently high performance evaluations. Your supervising partners speak very highly of your work. Thank you. Now, I've also reviewed the ethics investigation, both your statement and Ms. Ward's. Marcus took a sip of water. I'm going to be direct with you, Mr. Reed. This situation is a mess, but it's not the mess Adrian Wolfe would like us to believe it is. Daniel felt something unknot slightly in his chest. What do you mean? I mean that what happened between you and Ms. Ward appears to be exactly what you both claim. An isolated incident between 2 consenting adults that resulted in an unplanned pregnancy. Messy, certainly. Complicated, absolutely. But not evidence of coercion or systematic abuse of power. Marcus set down his glass. Adrian, however, has been working very hard to suggest otherwise. He's been making calls, raising concerns, building a narrative that serves his own agenda. What agenda? Adrian wants a senior partnership. He's been campaigning for it for 3 years and been passed over twice. He views Lena as an obstacle. She's younger, more talented, and has support he doesn't. Taking her down removes that obstacle. And I'm collateral damage. Not if I can help it. Marcus leaned forward. I'm proposing something. An independent audit of the entire situation. Not just your relationship with Lena, but Adrian's conduct, the way this information was weaponized, the donor-event confrontation. Everything. Why would you do that? Because I don't like bullies, Mr. Reed, and Adrian Wolf is a bully with too much influence and too little oversight. More importantly, because I believe in protecting people who do good work from those who would destroy them for political gain. He paused. Lena has leverage as a senior partner, but you don't. You need someone in your corner who does. I'm offering to be that person. Daniel studied Marcus carefully, looking for the trap. What do you want in return? Honesty, cooperation with the audit, and an agreement that if we clear this up, you'll continue to do the excellent work you've been doing without letting Adrian's vindictiveness poison your perspective on the firm. That's assuming I'm cleared. The evidence supports clearance, Marcus said, but we need to be thorough. Can I count on your cooperation? Daniel thought about Lena fighting this battle alone, about Maya waiting at home, about the baby coming in October, whether his career survived or not. Yes, he said, you can count on it. Good. Marcus stood, offering his hand again. I'll be in touch soon. And Mr. Reed, try not to worry too much. This firm has survived worse scandals than an unexpected pregnancy. Outside, Daniel stood on the sidewalk trying to process what had just happened. An ally on the board, an independent audit. The possibility, not guarantee, but possibility that this might actually work out. He pulled out his phone and texted Lena. Marcus Webb just offered to help. Did you know about this? Her response came quickly. Yes. I called in that favor I mentioned. He's one of the good ones. How many favors do you have left? Enough. Don't worry about my capital. Worry about getting through this. Daniel stared at the phone, at those words. Don't worry. Get through this. That made it sound simple when nothing about this was simple. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the way through wasn't finding a simple path, but accepting the complexity and navigating it anyway. He drove home feeling something that wasn't quite hope, but was at least adjacent to it. The audit began the following week. Daniel received a formal notice that his suspension was continuing, but that he'd be compensated during the investigation period. Marcus's influence already visible in that small mercy. He met with auditors twice, answering the same questions he'd answered for Catherine Mills, but in greater depth, providing access to his emails and calendar and phone records. It was invasive and exhausting and somehow less terrifying than the first interview, maybe because he knew Marcus was watching, making sure the process stayed fair. Lena texted him updates periodically. The auditors had interviewed Adrian 3 times. They'd spoken to everyone who attended the winter retreat. They'd reviewed the firm's entire policy manual, looking for precedents and violations. The process was thorough to the point of absurdity, but thoroughness was what they needed. 2 weeks into the audit, Daniel got a call from his supervising partner. Daniel, I wanted you to hear this from me directly. The preliminary findings are in. Daniel's heart kicked against his ribs. And? No evidence of coercion, favoritism, or policy violation. What happened at the retreat was deemed a private matter between consenting adults. The pregnancy, while complicating workplace dynamics, doesn't constitute grounds for termination or discipline. Relief flooded through him so intensely it was almost painful. So I'm cleared? Pending final board approval, yes. There will be some conditions, reporting structure changes, mandatory HR training, regular check-ins to ensure no appearance of impropriety going forward, but you're being reinstated. Daniel sat down heavily on his couch, the phone pressed to his ear. What about Lena? Ms. Ward's case is being handled separately, but my understanding is the findings are similar. The board meets Friday to formalize everything. A pause. You should be proud, Daniel. You handled this with integrity. That matters. Thank you, Daniel managed. When can I come back? Monday, assuming the board signs off. We'll have paperwork to complete, procedures to review, but Monday. The call ended. Daniel sat there in his living room in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, feeling like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and could finally exhale. He called Lena immediately. "They cleared me," he said when she answered. "Preliminary findings, no violations. I'm coming back Monday." He heard her breath catch. "They told you that?" "Just now." "What about you?" "I don't know yet. Board meeting Friday, like you said." Her voice was tight with something between relief and residual fear. "Daniel, this isn't over. Adrian will appeal. He'll make noise. Let him," Daniel interrupted. "We did what we were supposed to do. We told the truth, we cooperated, and the investigation cleared us. Whatever Adrian does now, he does it without the weight of an ethics violation backing him up." Lena was quiet for a moment. "You sound different." "I feel different. I feel like maybe we actually survived this." "Survived the investigation," Lena corrected. "We still have to figure out how to actually do this, co-parent while working together, manage the optics, handle whatever fallout comes when people realize the baby is yours." "One crisis at a time," Daniel said. "Right now, I'm choosing to believe we got through the hardest part." "You're an optimist." "I'm a single parent. Same thing." He heard her almost laugh, that soft exhale that meant she was smiling despite herself. "Okay, optimist. I'll call you after the board meeting Friday." "Lena?" "Yes?" "We're going to be okay. All three of us." "Four," she corrected softly. "Don't forget Maya." "All four of us," Daniel agreed. "We're going to be okay." He believed it too, in that moment. Believed it enough to pick up Maya from school that afternoon with something lighter in his chest. Believed it enough to make her favorite dinner and actually enjoy the chaotic joy of her presence instead of being distracted by worry. They were doing dishes together when his phone rang. Not Lena this time. Sarah Chen, the lawyer. "Daniel, I just got off the phone with the ethics committee. The preliminary findings will be presented to the board Friday, but there's been a development." The lightness in Daniel's chest evaporated instantly. "What kind of development?" "Adrian Wolf submitted additional materials this afternoon. Photos, communication logs, a formal complaint alleging that the investigation was biased due to Ms. Ward's influence on board members." "What photos?" "You and Ms. Ward leaving her apartment building. Timestamps from various evenings over the past month." Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "He's claiming they demonstrate an ongoing relationship that contradicts your statements about keeping things strictly separate." Daniel's mind raced backward through careful meetings, late-night conversations about doctor appointments and insurance paperwork. We were discussing the pregnancy, planning for the baby. That's not a relationship, that's responsible co-parenting. "I know that. You know that. But the optics are complicated, especially given the timing. If Adrian can convince the board that you lied about maintaining separation, it undermines the entire investigation." "So what do we do?" "We prepare for the board meeting. Both you and Lena will need to present your case directly, explain the context of those meetings. Marcus Webb is still in your corner, but you'll need to be convincing." She paused. "Daniel, I need you to understand something. Even if the investigation cleared you, if the board decides there's been ongoing deception about the nature of your relationship, they can still terminate your employment, both of yours." The fear came roaring back, worse than before because he'd let himself believe they were safe. "When's the meeting?" "Friday at 2. You'll be notified officially tomorrow, but I wanted you to have time to prepare." After Sarah hung up, Daniel stood in his kitchen with soapy hands and a daughter singing in the next room and felt the ground shifting under him again. They'd survived the investigation only to face Adrian's endgame, one more attack designed to destroy everything they'd fought to protect. He dried his hands carefully, called Lena, and told her everything Sarah had said. "Photos," Lena said flatly. "He had someone following us." "Apparently." "That's harassment. That's potentially illegal surveillance." "But the photos exist," Daniel said. "And they show us together, repeatedly, which contradicts what we told the investigators about maintaining separation." "Because we were maintaining professional separation while trying to responsibly plan for a child," Lena said, her voice sharp with frustration. "Those aren't contradictory things. Try explaining that to a board that's looking for reasons to avoid scandal." Lena went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, colder, the tone she used in depositions. Then we don't explain. We show them. Show them what? Friday's board meeting isn't just about defending ourselves. It's about putting Adrian on trial for what he's actually done. Weaponizing private information, conducting surveillance, creating a hostile work environment designed to force us out. She paused. Marcus can help with this. He's been waiting for an opening to address Adrian's conduct. We just handed him one. You want to go on offense? Well, I want to stop defending and start demanding accountability. Adrian's been operating in shadows, using innuendo and implication. We drag him into the light and make him answer for his actual behavior, not his carefully crafted narrative. Daniel thought about Friday, about standing in front of the board with his career and Lena's and their family's future, all balanced on whether they could convince powerful people that they'd done nothing wrong while someone else had done everything wrong. Okay, he said, then that's what we do. Are you sure? This gets ugly, Daniel. This gets public and personal, and there's no going back once we commit to this path. He thought about Maya, about the baby coming in October, about the kind of example he wanted to set for both his children about when to fight and when to fold. I'm sure, he said. Let's finish this. Friday afternoon arrived with the weight of an execution. Daniel wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for his second promotion interview, and met Lena in the lobby 10 minutes before the board meeting. She looked fierce in charcoal gray, her hair pulled back severely, her expression set in lines that could have been carved from stone. Ready? She asked. No, but I'm here anyway. They rode the elevator to the 62nd floor in silence, Marcus Webb joining them at 59. He carried a leather folder thick with documents. I've prepared a full presentation on Adrian's conduct, he said without preamble. Timeline of harassment, evidence of surveillance, witness statements from people he's intimidated or manipulated over the years. When we're done, the question won't be whether you two violated policy. It'll be whether Adrian should face criminal charges. Will it work? Daniel asked. Truth usually does if you present it forcefully enough. Marcus looked at them both. But you need to be prepared for the board to take the easy way out. Fire all three of you and claim they're cleaning house. Are you ready for that possibility? Lena's jaw tightened. If they fire me for being pregnant and honest, I'll own this firm by the time my lawyers are done. Good, Marcus said. Hold on to that fury. You'll need it. The boardroom was exactly what Daniel expected. Mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 7 board members sat waiting, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Adrian was already there, positioned near the head of the table with the confidence of someone who thought he'd already won. Catherine Mills called the meeting to order, outlining the situation with clinical precision. The preliminary investigation had cleared both Daniel and Lena of policy violations, but new evidence had emerged suggesting possible deception about the nature of their relationship. The board needed to make a final determination. Adrian went first, presenting his photos with theatrical gravity. Daniel and Lena leaving her building at 10:43 on a Tuesday, entering together at 9:15 on a Thursday. The meetings, he suggested, demonstrated an ongoing romantic relationship that contradicted their claims of professional separation. These two have been lying from the beginning, Adrian said smoothly. The investigation cleared them because they manipulated the process, used Ms. Ward's influence to suppress inconvenient truths, but the evidence doesn't lie. They've been conducting an affair while claiming it was a single incident, and that pattern of deception should be grounds for immediate termination. Daniel felt rage building in his chest, but Lena's hand found his under the table, squeezing once in warning. Wait, let Marcus work. And Marcus did work. He stood slowly, opened his folder, and began methodically dismantling everything Adrian had built. The photos showed meetings, yes, but phone records and calendar data showed those meetings corresponded precisely with doctor appointments, insurance discussions, and practical planning for the pregnancy. Every instance could be documented, explained, verified. More damning was what Marcus presented next. Evidence that Adrian had hired a private investigator to conduct surveillance without legal justification. Evidence of other employees Adrian had targeted over the years, using similar tactics of innuendo and manufactured scandal. Witness statements describing a pattern of harassment that HR had repeatedly failed to address. Mr. Wolf didn't uncover a scandal, Marcus said quietly. He created one, and he did it using methods that violate both company policy and potentially several laws regarding workplace harassment and illegal surveillance. Adrian's confident expression had started to crack. That's absurd. I was protecting the firm's interests. By stalking two employees, Marcus interrupted. By publicly humiliating a pregnant woman at a donor event. By systematically attempting to destroy careers because you viewed a colleague as competition for a promotion? He turned to the board. The question before you isn't whether Daniel Reed and Lena Ward violated policy. The investigation already answered that definitively. The question is what you're going to do about Adrian Wolf's conduct. The silence that followed was profound. Daniel watched the board members' faces, seeing the calculation happening, the weighing of liability and optics and political capital. Finally, the board chair spoke. We'll need to deliberate. Mr. Reed, Miss Ward, Mr. Wolf, please wait outside. They filed out into the hallway. Adrian moved to one end, Daniel and Lena to the other, Marcus standing between them like a referee. That was brutal, Daniel said quietly. That was necessary, Marcus corrected. What happens now? Now we find out if truth matters more than convenience. They waited 47 minutes. Daniel counted them, checking his watch every few minutes like it might speed the process. Lena stood absolutely still beside him, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Marcus made 3 phone calls, his voice too low to hear clearly. Adrian paced at the far end of the hallway, his earlier confidence eroding with each passing minute. Finally, the boardroom door opened. Catherine Mills appeared, her expression professionally neutral. The board has reached a decision. Please come back in. They filed back to their seats. The board chair, a woman named Elizabeth Carver, who'd been with the firm for 30 years, looked at each of them in turn before speaking. This has been a deeply troubling situation, she began. Not because of the pregnancy itself, which is a private matter, but because of how information about that pregnancy was weaponized and what that reveals about certain aspects of our firm culture. Daniel felt Lena's hand find his again under the table, her grip tight enough to hurt. The investigation found no evidence of coercion or policy violation between Mr. Reed and Mrs. Ward, Elizabeth continued. Their relationship, such as it was, consisted of a single consensual encounter that resulted in pregnancy. Their subsequent meetings were appropriate and necessary given the circumstances. The claims of ongoing deception were not supported by evidence. Adrian shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. However, Elizabeth said, and Daniel's stomach dropped, Mr. Wolf's conduct raises serious concerns. The unauthorized surveillance, the public confrontation at the donor event, and the pattern of behavior documented by Mr. Webb constitute harassment and create a hostile work environment. After careful deliberation, the board has decided to terminate Mr. Wolf's employment effective immediately. The words hung in the air like thunder. Adrian stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud against the floor. You can't be serious, he said, his voice raw with disbelief. I exposed misconduct. I protected the firm's reputation. You created a scandal where none existed, Elizabeth interrupted, her voice sharp. You violated employee privacy, used firm resources for personal vendettas, and demonstrated a pattern of behavior that makes you a liability. Your termination is final and non-negotiable. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards materialized at the door as if they'd been waiting. Adrian looked around the table, searching for allies, finding none. His gaze landed on Daniel with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. You think you won, but you just made an enemy who knows exactly where your weaknesses are. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Wolf, Marcus said calmly. Would you like to make it more explicit so we can discuss it with law enforcement? Adrian's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then he turned and left, the security guards flanking him like bookends. The door closed behind them with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. Elizabeth turned back to Daniel and Lena. Mr. Reed, you're reinstated effective Monday with full back pay for the suspension period. Your personnel file will reflect no disciplinary action. Ms. Ward, you retain your partnership position without sanction. However, she continued, and Daniel braced himself, given the unique circumstances, we're implementing some structural changes. Mr. Reed, you'll be transferred to the Corporate Litigation Division, reporting to partner James Morrison. This creates appropriate separation in the reporting structure and eliminates any appearance of favoritism. I understand, Daniel said, relief flooding through him so intensely he felt dizzy. Ms. Ward, we expect you to take appropriate maternity leave when the time comes, and we'll work with you to ensure a smooth transition of your cases. The firm fully supports you in this. Elizabeth's expression softened almost imperceptibly. We also want to make it clear that your pregnancy and your choice to co-parent with Mr. Reed are private matters that have no bearing on your professional standing here. Lena's voice was steady when she spoke, but Daniel heard the emotion beneath it. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Elizabeth said. Both of you will need to participate in updated workplace conduct training, and there will be regular check-ins with HR for the next 6 months to ensure the new reporting structure is working appropriately. This is still a complicated situation, and we need to manage it carefully. We understand, Daniel said. Good. Elizabeth stood, signaling the meeting's end. Welcome back, Mr. Reed. And Mrs. Ward, congratulations on your pregnancy. I hope everything goes smoothly. Outside the boardroom, Marcus shook both their hands with the satisfied expression of someone who just won a case everyone else thought was hopeless. That went better than expected, he said. Elizabeth's a pragmatist. She saw which outcome protected the firm's interests and chose accordingly. What happens to Adrian now? Lena asked. That depends on whether he's smart enough to take the severance package and disappear quietly or stupid enough to escalate. Marcus checked his watch. Either way, that's no longer your problem. Go home. Process this. Come back Monday. Ready to work. He left them standing in the hallway, the adrenaline of the past hours slowly draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Lena leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to her stomach where the baby was growing, invisible but undeniably present. We actually did it, she said quietly. We survived, Daniel corrected. That's not quite the same as winning. Adrian's gone. We're cleared. We both keep our jobs. Lena looked at him, something vulnerable showing through her usual control. That sounds like winning to me. Then we won, Daniel agreed. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been building since the board's decision. What happens now? With us, I mean. Not at work, but actually with the baby and figuring out how to make this work. Lena pushed away from the wall, straightening her jacket with the same precise movements she used for everything. Now we stop running damage control and start actually planning. Doctor's appointment next Wednesday at 2. You should come. You want me there? The baby's half yours, Daniel. Of course I want you there. She paused, something shifting in her expression. Unless you'd rather not. I'll be there, Daniel interrupted. Text me the address. They rode the elevator down together, the silence between them different now, less fraught and more tentative. When they reached the lobby, Lena turned to face him fully. I know this isn't how you imagined having another child, she said carefully. And I know I'm not easy to deal with. But I'm glad you didn't run. I'm glad you're staying. Daniel thought about all the ways he could respond, all the things he could say about fear and responsibility and the strange path that had brought them here. Instead, he just said, Me too. Lena nodded, something like relief crossing her face. Then she walked away toward the parking garage, her spine straight, her shoulders set, carrying herself like the warrior she'd proven herself to be. Daniel stood in the lobby for a moment longer, watching office workers stream past him, all of them immersed in their own dramas and complications. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen asking if he'd be late picking up Maya. He replied that he'd be there in 30 minutes, then headed to his car, feeling like he'd just survived something that should have destroyed him, but had somehow, impossibly, made him stronger instead. Maya was waiting on the school steps when Daniel arrived, her backpack drooping off one shoulder, her face bright with whatever small victories kindergarten had provided that day. She climbed into the car, chattering about art class and the injustice of assigned seating at lunch, and Daniel let her talk, grateful for the normalcy of her concerns. Dad, she said eventually, you don't have the sad face anymore. No, Daniel agreed. I don't. Did you fix the thing? I fixed the thing. Maya considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. Good. I don't like when you're sad. I don't either, Bug. They stopped for ice cream even though it was almost dinner time, Daniel's small rebellion against a day that had demanded too much seriousness. Maya got chocolate chip cookie dough in a waffle cone and proceeded to wear more of it than she ate, her face sticky with joy. "Can we call Grandma tonight?" she asked between licks. "I want to tell her about my drawing." Daniel's mother lived 3 states away, close enough to visit occasionally, but far enough that their relationship existed mostly through phone calls and video chats. She was a good grandmother to Maya, warm and patient in ways she hadn't been as a mother, as if distance and age had softened her edges. "Sure," Daniel said. "After dinner." They called from the kitchen while Daniel made pasta, Maya holding the phone and narrating her entire week in breathless detail while his mother made encouraging sounds. Finally, Maya handed the phone over. "She sounds happy," his mother said. "How are you, Daniel?" "Better than I've been in a while," he admitted. "Work situation resolved?" He told her a carefully edited version of the suspension, leaving out the pregnancy in Lena and anything that would require explanations he wasn't ready to give yet. "Yeah, I'm going back Monday." "Good. You're too talented to be sidelined by office politics." She paused. "You'd tell me if there was something more going on, wouldn't you?" Daniel looked at Maya, who was now arranging her stuffed animals in elaborate social hierarchies at the kitchen table. "When there's something to tell, you'll be the first to know." "That's not quite an answer, but I'll take it for now." "Love you, sweetheart." "Love you too, Mom." After Maya went to bed that night, Daniel sat in his living room with a beer he didn't really want and tried to process everything that had happened. Adrian fired, his job restored, Lena's partnership secured, the baby coming in October, ready or not. He pulled out his phone and texted Lena. "Thank you for fighting, for both of us." Her response came a few minutes later. "Thank you for not running, for trusting the process even when it looked hopeless." "What time Wednesday?" he asked. 2 p.m. "I'll send you the address. I'll be there." He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Wednesday, about seeing the baby on an ultrasound screen, about making this abstract thing real in ways he hadn't quite processed yet. A second child, a different mother, a family that looked nothing like the one he'd imagined when Maya was born. But maybe that was okay. Maybe families didn't have to look like anything except people choosing each other, day after day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Daniel finished his beer, checked the locks, and went to bed feeling like he'd survived a war but couldn't quite celebrate yet because the next battle was already forming on the horizon. Monday morning arrived with the surreal quality of returning to normal after nothing about the situation was normal. Daniel dropped Maya at school, drove to the office, and rode the elevator to 54 like he'd done for 4 years. Except this time everyone knew. The suspension, the investigation, the pregnancy. It was all public now, whispered in conference rooms and discussed over coffee. People stared, some with curiosity, some with judgment, some with the kind of clinical interest usually reserved for particularly dramatic case studies. Daniel ignored them all, focused on reaching his desk and pretending the past month hadn't happened. James Morrison met him at his new workstation in the corporate litigation division, a space with actual windows and better technology than his old desk. "Welcome back," James said, offering his hand. "I know this is awkward, but I wanted to say directly that what happened was bullshit, and I'm glad you survived it." Daniel shook his hand, surprised by the directness. "Thank you. Adrian was a cancer in this place. Should have been cut out years ago." James handed him a file. "This is the Weston merger case. I'm bringing you on as second chair. It's high profile, complicated, and will keep you busy enough that the gossip will die down eventually." "I appreciate it." "Don't thank me yet. The case is a nightmare, and opposing counsel is ruthless." James grinned. "But you're good at nightmares, apparently, so I figure you'll do fine." He left Daniel to settle in, and for the next several hours Daniel immersed himself in case files and contract language, grateful for work that demanded his full attention. People stopped staring eventually, or at least stopped being obvious about it. The day passed in a blur of meetings and research and the familiar rhythms of legal work. Lena texted him once, "How's the first day back? Surviving? You? Same. See you Wednesday." He went home to Maya and dinner and homework and the blessed normalcy of single-parent routine. Tuesday was the same, then Wednesday arrived, and with it the doctor's appointment that would make everything undeniably real. Lena had sent him the address of a medical office in a nicer part of the city, the kind of place that whispered expensive and exclusive. He arrived 10 minutes early, found her already in the waiting room reading a medical journal with the same intensity she brought to case law. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her. "Hey." She closed the journal. "Nervous?" "Terrified." "Good. That makes two of us." She glanced around the waiting room, which was empty except for one other couple arguing quietly about baby names. "I've never done this before. The pregnancy thing. I don't know what to expect." "I did it once," Daniel said. "But I wasn't there for most of the appointments. Maya's mom didn't want me involved until after the birth." "That's horrible." "It was what it was." He looked at Lena, at the careful way she held herself, the tension in her shoulders. "We're doing this differently." "Yes," she agreed. "We are." A nurse called Lena's name. They followed her to an examination room where she was weighed and measured and asked a series of questions about symptoms and concerns. Then the doctor arrived, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of competent warmth. "Ms. Ward," she said, then looked at Daniel. "And this must be Dad." "Daniel Reed," he said, offering his hand. "Dr. Patterson." "Nice to meet you both." She pulled up a stool, reviewed Lena's chart. "Everything looks good so far. Healthy weight gain, normal blood pressure, all the labs came back clean. Ready to see your baby?" Lena nodded, something vulnerable flickering across her face. Dr. Patterson prepared the ultrasound machine while Lena lay back on the examination table, pulling up her shirt to expose her stomach. There was a visible curve now, undeniable evidence of the life growing inside her. Dr. Patterson applied gel, then pressed the ultrasound wand to Lena's skin. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy black and white images that resolved slowly into something recognizable. A head. Tiny limbs. The rapid flutter of a heartbeat. "There's your baby," Dr. Patterson said softly, "measuring right on track for 14 weeks. Heartbeat strong at 148. Everything looks perfect." Daniel stared at the screen, at the small person who was half him, half Lena, entirely their responsibility. He'd seen this before with Maya, but it had been different then, mediated through someone else's experience. This was immediate, visceral, undeniable. "That's really them?" Lena asked, her voice unsteady. "That's really them," Dr. Patterson confirmed. "Would you like to know the sex?" Lena looked at Daniel. He nodded. "If you can tell." "Doctor," Patterson moved the wand, focusing on a specific area. "Looks like you're having a girl. Congratulations." "A daughter. Another daughter." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest, some reserve of emotion he hadn't known he was holding back. Beside him, Lena had tears streaming down her face, her hand pressed to her mouth. "A girl," she whispered. "We're having a girl." "Do you want pictures?" Dr. Patterson asked. "Yes," they said simultaneously. Dr. Patterson printed several images, the grainy photographs that would become the first evidence of this child's existence. She wiped the gel from Lena's stomach, gave them pamphlets about nutrition and exercise and what to expect in the second trimester, and left them alone in the examination room. Lena sat up slowly, staring at the ultrasound pictures like they might disappear if she looked away. "A girl," she said again. "I don't know why that makes it more real, but it does." "Because now she's not just a baby," Daniel said. "She's a person, someone specific." "Have you thought about names?" Daniel shook his head. "That feels like something we should decide together." Lena looked at him, something shifting in her expression. "Together," she repeated. "I keep forgetting that's what this is, that we're actually doing this together." "We are," Daniel confirmed. "Unless you've changed your mind about wanting me involved." "No," Lena said quickly. "No, I haven't changed my mind. I'm just not used to partnership. Not like this." "Neither am I," Daniel admitted. "But we figure it out as we go." They left the doctor's office together, walking to the parking garage in silence. At Lena's car, she turned to face him. "Maya," she said, "have you told her yet?" "Not yet. I wanted to wait until we were sure everything was stable, until I knew what to tell her." "And now you know?" Now I know she's getting a sister, Daniel said. Now I know we're going to make this work, whatever that looks like. Lena nodded slowly. When you tell her I'd like to be there, if that's okay. The request surprised him. You want to meet Maya? She's going to be this baby's sister. I should probably know her. Lena's expression was uncertain, vulnerable in ways she usually kept hidden. Unless you think that's too much too soon. Daniel thought about Maya, about her endless questions and her fierce need to understand her world, about how she'd react to knowing she was getting a sibling, to meeting the woman who would be that sibling's mother. Saturday, he said. Come over Saturday afternoon. We'll tell her together. You're sure? I'm sure. She deserves to know, and she deserves to meet you. Fair warning, though, she's 5 and has no filter, and will probably ask you 1,000 inappropriate questions. Lena smiled, tentative but real. I think I can handle that. They exchanged a few more logistical details, then Lena got in her car and drove away. Daniel stood in the parking garage holding ultrasound pictures of his daughter, feeling the weight of what came next settling over him like snow accumulation, silent and inevitable and transforming everything it touched. He stopped at a bookstore on the way home and bought 3 books about preparing older siblings for new babies. That night, after Maya's bath, he sat on her bed and tried to figure out how to begin. Bug, I need to talk to you about something important. Maya looked up from her stuffed elephant, her expression serious. Is it the sad thing again? No, it's a different thing. A good thing, but also a big change thing. What kind of change? Daniel took a breath. You're going to have a baby sister. Maya blinked. Like a real baby? Like a real baby. She'll be born in October. Where is she now? She's growing in her mom's tummy. That's how babies work. They start very small and grow until they're ready to be born. Maya processed this information with the careful concentration she applied to complex problems. Who's her mom? Her name is Lena. She works at my office. Is Lena your girlfriend? No, Lena and I are friends who are going to have a baby together. It's complicated, but the important thing is that the baby will be your sister, and I'll still be your dad, and nothing about how much I love you is going to change. But there will be a baby, Maya said slowly. In our house? Some of the time, yes. Other times the baby will be at Lena's house. We're still figuring out exactly how it will work. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious. Will the baby take my room? No, we'll make space for her, but your room stays your room. Will she cry a lot? Probably. Babies cry. But they also do other things. They smile and laugh, and eventually they play. You'll get to be a big sister, which is a really important job. Maya looked at her elephant, then back at Daniel. Can I meet Lena? She's coming over Saturday. You can meet her then and ask her whatever questions you want. Will she like me? The question, so small and vulnerable, made Daniel's chest ache. He pulled Maya close, holding her tight. Everyone likes you, Bug. You're amazing. Lena's going to think you're amazing too. Okay, Maya said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I guess having a sister could be okay. Yeah, Daniel agreed. I think it could be okay too. He read her extra stories that night, letting her fall asleep curled against him while he thought about Saturday, about introducing these 2 people who would be connected for the rest of their lives, whether they were ready for it or not. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine, and mild temperatures, and everything feeling deceptively simple. Daniel cleaned the house twice, made cookies he immediately burned, and generally drove himself into a state of productive anxiety that Maya found hilarious. Dad, you're being weird, she announced from the couch where she was arranging her stuffed animals. I know, sorry. Is it because Lena's coming? Yes. You shouldn't be nervous. You said she's nice. She is nice. I'm not nervous about her being nice. I'm nervous about you 2 meeting and getting along. Maya rolled her eyes with the exasperation of someone much older. I'm good at meeting people, Dad. I meet people all the time at school. You're right. You're great at meeting people. I'm being ridiculous. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Daniel opened it to find Lena standing on his porch holding a gift bag, looking more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. Hi, she said. Hi, come in. She stepped inside, taking in his modest house with its lived-in furniture and Maya's artwork covering the refrigerator and the general comfortable chaos of a single parent's home. Maya emerged from the living room, stopping a few feet away to study Lena with open curiosity. "You're Lena," Maya said. "I am, and you're Maya. Dad says you're having a baby." "That's right. And the baby's going to be my sister." "She is." Maya moved closer, tilting her head. "You're really pretty." Lena blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Thank you, so are you." "I know," Maya said matter-of-factly. "My dad tells me all the time. What's in the bag?" "Maya," Daniel said, "let Lena sit down first." "It's fine," Lena said, sitting on the couch and setting the bag beside her. "I brought you something. I hope that's okay." "Presents are always okay," Maya said, climbing up beside her. Lena pulled out a book, beautifully illustrated, about being a big sister. "I thought maybe we could read this together." Maya took the book carefully, examining the cover. "Will you read it to me?" "If you want." "I want." Maya settled against Lena's side with the casual trust of children who hadn't yet learned to doubt, and Lena opened the book, her voice steady as she began to read. Daniel watched them from the doorway, these two people who would be connected through him and through the baby growing between them, and felt something settle in his chest. It wasn't simple and it wasn't easy, and it would probably get complicated 100 different ways before the baby even arrived. But watching Maya lean against Lena while they turned pages together, seeing the careful way Lena answered Maya's endless questions about babies and sisters and whether the baby would like elephants, Daniel thought maybe it would be okay. Maybe all of them together could figure out how to be a family, even if that family didn't look like anything traditional or expected. When the book ended, Maya looked up at Lena seriously. "Can I see the baby?" "She's too small to see yet," Lena explained. "She's still growing inside me." "Can I feel her?" Lena glanced at Daniel, uncertain. He nodded. "That's up to Lena, Bug." "You can feel," Lena said softly. She took Maya's small hand and placed it on her stomach. "She's about here. You won't be able to feel her move yet, but she's there." Maya kept her hand there solemnly, her face concentrated. "Hi, baby sister," she said quietly. "I'm Maya. I'm going to be the best big sister ever." Lena's eyes were bright with tears, her hand covering Maya's on her stomach. "She's very lucky to have you." They stayed like that for a moment, the three of them connected in the quiet living room, and Daniel felt the future shifting into something he could almost believe in, something that might actually work if they were all brave enough to try. After that first meeting, something shifted. Lena started coming over on Saturday afternoons, tentatively at first, then with increasing regularity. She and Maya would read together or work on art projects while Daniel made dinner, and gradually the strangeness wore off, replaced by something that almost resembled routine. Maya took to asking Lena questions with the relentless curiosity of a 5-year-old who'd discovered a new subject worth investigating. "What's your favorite color? Do you like pizza? Can you do a cartwheel? Have you ever seen a whale?" The questions ranged from profound to absurd, and Lena answered each one with patience that surprised Daniel. "She's relentless," Lena said one evening, after Maya had finally exhausted herself and fallen asleep on the couch between them. "Does she ever run out of questions?" "Not in my experience," Daniel said. "You're handling it well, though." "I like it, actually, the directness. She doesn't have any agenda, doesn't play political games, she just wants to know things." Lena looked at Maya's sleeping form, something soft in her expression. "It's refreshing." "Wait until she asks you something truly horrifying in public. Then we'll see how refreshing you find it." "I'm looking forward to it," Lena said, and Daniel thought she might actually mean it. The weeks passed in a strange hybrid of normal and surreal. At work, Daniel threw himself into the Weston merger case, grateful for the complexity that demanded his full attention. People had mostly stopped staring, or at least stopped being obvious about it. The gossip had moved on to other scandals, other dramas. He and Lena maintained careful professional distance at the office, their interactions limited to necessary project discussions in public spaces. But outside work, they were building something else. Doctors' appointments became regular dates on both their calendars. They argued about pediatricians and debated parenting philosophies and slowly worked out the logistics of co-parenting across 2 households. Lena started looking at 3-bedroom apartments seriously, dragging Daniel along to give opinions on neighborhoods and school districts. "This one has good light," she said in a condo that cost more than Daniel would make in 5 years. "And it's only 15 minutes from your house. Lena, this place is stunning, but can you actually afford it?" "Partner salary plus equity distributions," she said. "Yes, I can afford it. The question is whether it's the right environment for a child." Daniel looked around the pristine white walls, the designer fixtures, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "It's beautiful, but it doesn't exactly scream baby-friendly." "What does baby-friendly look like?" "More durable? Less breakable? Space for toys and mess and all the chaos that comes with kids." He moved to the second bedroom, imagining it transformed. This could work as a nursery, though. Good size, plenty of natural light. Lena joined him, standing close enough that he could smell her perfume. "You really think I can do this? The whole mother thing?" "I've watched you negotiate with Maya for the last month," Daniel said. "You're already doing it." "Maya's 5. She can articulate her needs. A baby just screams and expects you to figure out what's wrong." "That's true. But you're the smartest person I know. You'll figure it out." Lena was quiet for a moment. "What if I'm terrible at it?" "Then you'll be terrible at it sometimes, and great at it other times, and mostly you'll just be adequate and exhausted like every other parent." Daniel turned to face her. "There's no secret, Lena. You just show up and do your best and love them even when it's hard. That's all any of us can do." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Maya's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her. She saved me when everything else fell apart." "And this one?" Lena's hand moved to her stomach, the gesture becoming automatic now. "What's she going to do?" "I don't know yet," Daniel admitted, "but I'm looking forward to finding out." Lena bought the condo 2 weeks later. Daniel helped her pick out furniture that was both stylish and practical, vetoing the white couch and advocating for something in dark gray that could survive the inevitable spills and stains. They assembled a crib together one Sunday, while Maya helped by handing them the wrong tools and narrating everything they did wrong. "The instructions say page 4, Maya announced importantly. "You're on page 6. "We skipped ahead because we're rebels," Daniel said, wrestling with a particularly stubborn bolt. "Dad, that's not how instructions work." "Your father has never met an instruction manual he actually followed," Lena said, holding the side panel steady. "That's because instruction manuals are suggestions, not rules." "That explains so much about your approach to workplace procedures," Lena muttered. Maya giggled, delighted by their banter, and Daniel caught Lena's eye over the half-assembled crib, sharing a smile that felt like something more than friendship, but less than he could name yet. Summer arrived with oppressive heat that made Lena's pregnancy increasingly uncomfortable. She was in her 3rd trimester now, visibly pregnant in ways that couldn't be hidden or ignored. At work, people treated her with exaggerated care, offering her seats and asking if she needed anything with the kind of hovering attention that drove her quietly insane. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she snapped at a junior associate who'd tried to carry her briefcase. "I can manage my own files." Daniel watched from a distance, biting back a smile. Lena at 8 months pregnant was even more formidable than usual, as if the physical vulnerability of her condition made her double down on projecting strength everywhere else. But in private, she was different. Tired in ways that went beyond physical exhaustion, worried about things she couldn't control. Daniel found her in the nursery one evening, sitting in the rocking chair they'd assembled, staring at the empty crib. "Second thoughts?" he asked from the doorway. "100 thoughts," Lena said. "I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if she's sick? What if I can't breastfeed? What if I drop her or forget her in a car or make one of the 1,000 mistakes that haunt parents in news stories?" Daniel sat on the floor beside the chair. "You'll make mistakes. Different mistakes than those, probably, but mistakes. That's guaranteed. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be honest." He looked up at her. "Maya broke her arm when she was 3 because I turned my back for 30 seconds at the playground. I felt like the worst father in the world. But she healed, and we both learned from it, and now she has a great story about her purple cast. What if my mistakes are worse than a broken arm? Then we deal with them when they happen. Together." Daniel reached up, taking her hand. You're not doing this alone, Lena. I know it feels like you are sometimes, but you're not. I'm here. Maya's here. We're a team, even if we're a weird, unconventional team. Lena's fingers tightened around his. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. I know I'm not supposed to be. I know I'm supposed to be confident and prepared and all the things I usually am, but I'm terrified that I'm going to be terrible at the one thing that actually matters. Being scared means you care, Daniel said. It means you understand the weight of what we're doing. That's not weakness, Lena. That's wisdom. She was quiet for a long moment, her free hand resting on her stomach where the baby was moving, restless and insistent. She's active tonight, Lena said. Want to feel? Daniel stood, placing his hand where Lena guided it. He felt the strong kick immediately, the undeniable presence of his daughter making herself known. She's got your determination, he said, already making demands. Or your stubbornness. That kick felt pretty stubborn. Maybe both. He kept his hand there, feeling the movement, the life they'd created together in one thoughtless moment that had somehow become the most important thing in both their lives. Have you thought any more about names? They'd been circling this conversation for weeks, throwing out possibilities and rejecting them, unable to commit to anything that felt right. I like Emma, Lena said tentatively. Emma Rose. Daniel tested the name silently. Emma Rose Reed Ward? Or just Reed, or just Ward. We haven't decided that part yet either. Emma Rose Reed, Daniel said aloud. It sounds right. Yeah, Lena agreed softly. It does. They stayed like that for a while, his hand on her stomach, feeling their daughter move between them, and Daniel thought about how impossible this moment would have seemed 6 months ago, how much had changed since that night in the supply closet, when they'd been strangers seeking warmth. Lena's maternity leave started in early October, 2 weeks before her due date. The firm threw her a small party, professionally cordial but genuinely warm, and she accepted their well wishes with the grace of someone who'd learned to let people care about her. Daniel caught her in the hallway afterward, carrying the enormous gift basket someone had assembled. Need help with that? I've got it, Lena said, then reconsidered. Actually, yes. This thing weighs approximately 1,000 pounds. He took the basket, walking with her to the parking garage. How are you feeling? Huge, exhausted, ready for this to be over. She paused at her car. Also terrified that it's almost over and then the real part begins. The real part is easier in some ways, Daniel said. At least when she's here, you can see what she needs instead of guessing. Or harder because her needs are constant and immediate and there's no break. Also true. He loaded the basket into her trunk. Maya wants to know if she can come over this weekend to help set up the last of the nursery. Lena smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Tell her yes. I could use her expert opinions on blanket arrangement. She has very strong opinions about blankets. I've noticed. They stood in the parking garage, the fluorescent lights harsh overhead, and Daniel felt the familiar pull toward her that he'd been carefully ignoring for months. The urge to close the distance, to offer comfort that went beyond words. But they'd been so careful, maintaining boundaries even as they built intimacy around the edges. Lena, he started, not sure what he was going to say. Don't, she said quietly. Whatever you're thinking, don't. We're doing so well at this, at being partners and co-parents and friends. Don't complicate it. What if I want to complicate it? Then you're an idiot, she said, but there was no heat in it. We have a baby coming in 2 weeks, Daniel. A baby who needs us to have our act together. This thing we're doing, this careful balance, it's working. Let's not break it by wanting more than we can sustain. She was right. He knew she was right. But standing there in the parking garage with her looking tired and beautiful and scared, he wanted to argue anyway. Instead, he just nodded. Okay, he said. Friends and co-parents. I can do that. Good. She opened her car door, pausing before getting in. Thank you, Daniel, for everything, for not running, for showing up, for being better at this than I ever expected. You're welcome, Charlotte, he said. Drive safe. He watched her drive away, then got in his own car and sat there for a while trying to untangle the complicated mess of feelings that had been building since the pregnancy test, since the investigation, since every quiet moment they'd shared building toward this future that was almost here. His phone rang. Maya's school, which never called unless something was wrong. "Mr. Reed, this is Principal Martinez. Maya's fine, but she had a small incident on the playground. We'd like you to come pick her up." "I'll be right there." He found Maya in the nurse's office with an ice pack pressed to her forehead and a defiant expression on her face. "What happened, Bug?" "Tommy said my baby sister wasn't real," Maya announced. "So I pushed him." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Maya, we don't push people." "But he was lying. She is real. Lena showed me the pictures." "I know she's real, and you know she's real, but pushing isn't how we solve disagreements." "Then how do we solve them?" "With words. You explain the truth and walk away if they don't believe you." Maya considered this with obvious skepticism. "That seems less effective than pushing." "It's more effective in the long run," Daniel assured her. "Come on, let's get you home." In the car, Maya was quiet, still clutching her ice pack. Finally, she said, "Dad, when Emma's born, will people believe she's real then?" "Everyone will know she's real then, Bug." "Good. I want people to know I have a sister. I want to tell everyone." Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror, seeing the fierce pride on her small face, and felt something warm expand in his chest. "You're going to be such a good big sister." "I know," Maya said matter-of-factly. "I've been practicing." Emma Rose Reed arrived on October 21st at 3:47 in the morning after 14 hours of labor that Daniel witnessed from start to finish. Lena had called him at 1:30 in the afternoon saying her water had broken, and he'd left Maya with Mrs. Chen and driven to the hospital with his heart pounding in his throat. The labor was brutal. Lena, who faced down hostile opposing counsel without flinching, who'd stared down the board during the investigation with icy calm, broke down twice during contractions, gripping Daniel's hand hard enough to bruise. "I can't do this," she gasped during a particularly bad contraction. "I can't. It's too much." "You're doing it," Daniel said, brushing her sweat-soaked hair back from her forehead. "You're so strong. You're almost there." "Don't patronize me. I will murder you." Another contraction cut off her threat. "Murder me after," Daniel agreed. "Right now, just breathe." When Emma finally emerged, tiny and furious and perfect, the nurse placed her on Lena's chest, and both of them just stared at this small person they'd made. She was red-faced and squalling, her eyes squeezed shut, her hands balled into tiny fists. "She's here," Lena whispered, her voice broken with exhaustion and wonder. "She's actually here." Daniel touched Emma's impossibly small hand, feeling her fingers wrap reflexively around his. "She's perfect," he said, his own voice rough. "You're both perfect." The nurses took Emma to clean her up and do the standard tests, and Daniel stayed with Lena while she was stitched and cleaned and moved to a recovery room. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted beyond measure, and Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed watching her breathe, this woman who'd fought so hard for all of them. When Emma was brought back, cleaned and swaddled and finally quiet, Daniel held her for the first time. She was so small, so fragile, fitting easily in the crook of his arm. He'd held Maya as a newborn, but that had been different, mediated by his ex's presence, by the awareness that he was secondary in the whole process. This was immediate, direct. This was his daughter, depending on him from the first breath. "Hi, Emma," he whispered. "I'm your dad. Your sister Maya can't wait to meet you, and your mom is the strongest person I've ever met, even if she tried to murder me about an hour ago." Emma's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, trying to make sense of the world beyond the womb. Daniel felt his heart crack open in that devastating way it had when Maya was born, that complete surrender to love that left you vulnerable and terrified and grateful all at once. "I'm going to protect you," he promised quietly, "and mess up sometimes and probably embarrass you when you're older, but I'm always going to love you. That's guaranteed." Lena stirred in her bed, her eyes opening slowly. "Did she wake up?" "Just for a minute." Daniel brought Emma over. "Want to hold her?" Lena sat up carefully, wincing at the movement, and Daniel placed Emma in her arms. Mother and daughter regarded each other seriously, both of them figuring out this new relationship. "She looks like you," Daniel said. "Same nose, same chin." "She has your eyes," Lena countered, "or she will when they change from baby blue." "Maybe she'll look like herself eventually." "That would be revolutionary," Lena said dryly, but her voice was soft, her focus entirely on Emma. "I can't believe she's real. I can't believe we made this." "Believe it. She's very real and very much ours." They sat in the quiet hospital room as dawn broke outside the window, watching Emma sleep between them, and Daniel thought about all the ways they'd gotten here, all the choices that had seemed impossible at the time, but had somehow led to this moment. The supply closet in Vermont, the pregnancy test, the investigation, every moment of fear and uncertainty that had somehow resolved into this tiny person who needed them both. "Thank you," Lena said quietly. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting, for being here." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears. "For not letting me do this alone." "You were never going to do this alone," Daniel said. "Not after I saw those 2 pink lines. Some men would have run. I'm not some men, and you're not some woman. We're just us, figuring it out." Lena smiled, tired and real. "Just us," she agreed. "And Emma." "And Maya," Daniel added, "who's going to lose her mind when she meets her sister. Can she come today?" "If you're up for it." "I'm up for it," Lena said. "I want both my daughters here." The words hung in the air, simple and profound. Both my daughters. Not just Emma, but Maya too, claimed and included in this new family they were building from scratch. Daniel called Mrs. Chen and asked if she could bring Maya to the hospital. An hour later, his 5-year-old burst into the room with the enthusiasm of a small hurricane, Mrs. Chen trailing apologetically behind. "Is that her?" Maya demanded, staring at the bundle in Lena's arms. "Is that Emma?" "This is Emma," Lena confirmed. "Want to meet her?" Maya climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, guided by Daniel's hands. Lena adjusted Emma so Maya could see her clearly. "She's so small," Maya whispered, her usual volume control completely abandoned in favor of awe. "Can I touch her?" "Gentle," Lena said. "Just her hand." Maya reached out with one finger, touching Emma's tiny hand. Emma's fingers wrapped around Maya's in that reflexive newborn grip, and Maya's entire face lit up. "She's holding me," Maya breathed. "Dad, she's holding my hand. She knows I'm her sister." "She knows," Daniel agreed, his throat tight with emotion. "Hi, Emma," Maya said softly. "I'm Maya. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything important, like how to read and how to draw horses and which vegetables you can hide without Dad noticing." "Maya," Daniel said warningly. "What? She needs to know these things." Lena laughed, the sound exhausted but genuine. "She's lucky to have you, Maya." "I know," Maya said confidently. Then she looked at Lena seriously. "Are you okay? Having a baby looks really hard." "It was really hard," Lena admitted, "but it was worth it." Maya considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "If you need help, I'm very good at helping. I help my dad all the time." "I would love your help," Lena said. They stayed like that for a while, the 4 of them in the hospital room, becoming a family in the quiet morning light. Mrs. Chen took photos Daniel knew he'd treasure forever. Maya and Lena looking at Emma, Emma's tiny hand wrapped around Maya's finger, all of them together in the beginning of something new. Eventually, Maya had to go to school, leaving with dramatic reluctance and promises to come back immediately after. Mrs. Chen hugged them both, her eyes bright with tears. "She's beautiful," she said. "Congratulations to all of you." After they left, Daniel sat beside Lena's bed while Emma slept in the hospital bassinet. "That went well," he said. "Maya's amazing," Lena said. "You did an incredible job with her." "I got lucky. She makes it easy." "Don't downplay it. Single parenting is brutal, and you made it look effortless." Lena's hand found his, their fingers tangling together. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me we'll keep doing this, keep being honest, keep showing up, keep putting the girls first even when it's complicated." "I promise," Daniel said without hesitation. Always. Lena's eyes were closing again, exhaustion pulling her under. Good, she murmured, because I think we might actually be good at this. Daniel watched her sleep, watched Emma breathe in her bassinet, and thought about the impossible journey that had brought them here. From strangers to colleagues to something that defied simple definition, bound together by choice and consequence, and love that didn't fit conventional categories. The door they'd closed that first night had led them here, to this hospital room, to these two daughters who needed them both. And standing on this side of everything they'd survived, Daniel thought maybe Lena was right. Maybe they actually were good at this, at building something real from pieces that shouldn't have fit together, but somehow did. Outside the window, the city moved through its morning routines, oblivious to the small miracle happening in this quiet room. But inside, the world had shifted completely, reorganized around this tiny person and the family that had formed to protect her. And for the first time since those two pink lines appeared, Daniel let himself believe completely that everything was going to be okay. The first 2 weeks with Emma were exactly as brutal as Daniel remembered newborn life being, except multiplied by the complexity of coordinating between two households. Lena stayed at her condo, establishing routines while Daniel balanced his own work schedule with helping her and maintaining Maya's sense of normalcy. He slept in 3-hour increments, showed up to the office looking like he'd survived a natural disaster, and somehow managed to keep all the pieces moving. Maya adapted to sisterhood with enthusiasm that bordered on obsessive. She wanted to hold Emma constantly, narrate every diaper change, and offer unsolicited advice on burping techniques that she'd apparently learned from educational videos. "Dad, you're doing it wrong," she announced one evening while Daniel attempted to soothe a fussy Emma. "You have to pat her back in a rhythm, like this." She demonstrated on her stuffed elephant. "I've done this before, Bug. I raised you." "Yeah, but I watched 3 videos about it, so I'm basically an expert now." Lena, who was attempting to eat dinner one-handed while Emma occupied her other arm, laughed so hard she nearly choked. "Maya, you're going to be insufferable when you're a teenager, aren't you?" "Probably," Maya agreed cheerfully. "Can I sleep over tonight? I want to help with the midnight feeding." "Maya, you have school tomorrow," Daniel said. "So, I can sleep at school. I can't sleep through Emma's first weeks. These are important bonding moments." Lena caught Daniel's eye, something warm and amused passing between them. "She can stay," Lena said, "if it's okay with you." It became a pattern. Maya sleeping at Lena's condo on weekends, the 3 of them functioning as a unit while Daniel tried to figure out where he fit in this equation. He was Emma's father, absolutely, but he wasn't Lena's partner, wasn't living with them full-time, existed in this strange liminal space between family and outsider. The firm had given him flexible hours while Lena was on leave, which helped, but 3 weeks after Emma's birth, reality started reasserting itself. Cases needed attention, clients needed updates. The Weston merger was entering a critical phase that required his presence. "I have to go back to normal hours next week," Daniel told Lena one Sunday evening while Emma slept in her bassinet and Maya was occupied with building an elaborate block tower in the corner. "The case is heating up, and I can't keep working part-time." Lena looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that even concealer couldn't quite hide. "I know, I'll manage." "You don't have to manage alone. We can hire help, a night nurse, or I don't want strangers raising my daughter," Lena said sharply, then seemed to catch herself. "Sorry, I'm tired and hormonal and apparently irrational about childcare." "You're not irrational. You're protective. That's different." Daniel moved closer, lowering his voice so Maya wouldn't overhear. "But you also need sleep, real sleep, more than 2 hours at a time. Let me take Emma some nights, full nights, at my place. You get rest, I get time with her, everyone wins. She's still breastfeeding. You can pump. We'll figure out the logistics." He watched her face, seeing the resistance fighting against exhaustion. "Lena, you're an amazing mother, but you're running yourself into the ground. Let me help. Actually help, not just visit and offer advice." She was quiet for a long moment, looking at Emma sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the negotiations happening around her. "Tuesdays and Thursdays," Lena said finally. "You take her those nights, bring her back Wednesday and Friday mornings. I'll pump enough milk for the feedings." That works, Daniel agreed. Thank you for trusting me. I've always trusted you with her, Lena said quietly. It's trusting myself to let go that's hard. The new arrangement started the following week. Daniel converted his home office into a nursery, moving his desk to the corner of his bedroom and assembling the second crib they'd bought for this exact purpose. Maya supervised with her usual intense interest, offering commentary on everything from crib placement to the optimal arrangement of stuffed animals. The elephant should go here, she announced, positioning her old stuffed animal in the corner of Emma's crib, so she knows she has a big sister watching over her. That's perfect, Bug, Daniel said, his throat tight with emotion at the gesture. That first Tuesday night alone with Emma was terrifying in ways Daniel hadn't anticipated. With Maya, he'd had years to build confidence, to learn her patterns and needs. Emma was still a mystery, her cries meaning hunger or tiredness or discomfort, or sometimes apparently nothing at all except the general outrage of being a newborn. She woke at midnight, 2:30, and 4:45, each time demanding food and comfort with the imperious insistence of someone who'd never learned patience. Daniel walked circles around his house, bouncing her gently, singing off-key lullabies that Maya found hilarious when she wandered out of her room at 5 in the morning. Dad, you sound like a dying cat, Maya observed. Thank you for that helpful feedback, Daniel said, still bouncing Emma, who was finally starting to settle. Go back to bed. Can't. I'm awake now. Can I have cereal? They ate breakfast together in the pre-dawn quiet, Emma sleeping against Daniel's chest in the carrier, Maya chattering about her upcoming school project. It was chaotic and exhausting, and somehow exactly right, his two daughters together in his kitchen, becoming a family in these small, accumulated moments. When he dropped Emma back at Lena's condo Friday morning, she looked significantly more rested, her eyes clearer, her movements less frantic. How was it? She asked, taking Emma carefully. Exhausting. Perfect. She only cried for 3 hours straight once, so I'm calling it a win. That's actually pretty good for her. Lena settled Emma against her shoulder, the motion automatic now. Thank you, Daniel. I actually slept. Like, real sleep. I forgot what that felt like. You look better. I look less like a zombie, you mean? She paused, something uncertain crossing her face. Do you want coffee? I just made a pot. It was the first time she'd invited him to stay beyond the handoff, the first acknowledgement that maybe they were more than just co-parents coordinating schedules. Daniel checked his watch. He had an hour before he needed to be at the office. Coffee sounds great, he said. They sat in Lena's living room, Emma sleeping between them in her bouncer, and talked about nothing important. Work gossip, Maya's obsession with marine biology, whether Emma's hair would stay dark or lighten like Maya's had. Easy conversation that felt like something they'd been doing for years instead of months. I've been thinking, Lena said eventually, circling back to something more serious, about the future, about what this looks like long term. Daniel's pulse quickened. What do you mean? I mean, we're doing this piecemeal. Your place Tuesday and Thursday, my place the rest of the week, coordinating schedules and splitting time. It works now while she's tiny, but what about when she's older? What about school districts and custody arrangements and all the legal things we've been avoiding? What are you proposing? Lena set down her coffee, meeting his eyes directly. I'm proposing we make this official. Legal custody agreement, financial arrangements, everything documented properly, so there's no ambiguity. It was the practical approach, the lawyer's solution to an emotional situation. Daniel understood the logic, even as something in his chest tightened with disappointment at how clinical it sounded. Okay, he said. We can work something out. Split custody, alternating weeks, whatever makes sense. Or, Lena said carefully, we could consider something more integrated. Like what? She took a breath, and Daniel saw the vulnerability beneath her controlled exterior. Like you moving in here, or all of us finding a place together. Something where the girls grow up in one home with both parents present instead of shuttling between two houses. The suggestion hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying, and somehow exactly what Daniel hadn't let himself want. Lena, he said slowly, we're not together. We're co-parents, friends, but we're not a couple. Living together when we're not in a relationship, that's complicated. Everything about this is complicated, Lena countered. but I've been watching you with Maya and Emma, watching how you show up every single time without hesitation. And I keep thinking that maybe we're defining this wrong. Maybe we don't need to be a traditional couple to be a family. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what we are, but I know I trust you more than anyone. I know Emma deserves to have her father present every day, not just twice a week. I know Maya deserves stability, and so does Emma. Lena's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. And I know that when you're here, everything feels easier. Like I'm not doing this alone, even when it's hard. Daniel stared at her, his mind racing through implications and complications and the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. But underneath the fear was something else, something that felt like hope. You're proposing we live together, as co-parents, not as partners, but as family. Yes, Lena said. Separate bedrooms, clear boundaries, but one home. For the girls, for all of us. That's insane, Daniel said. Probably. People will make assumptions about us, about our relationship. Let them assume. We know the truth. Lena leaned forward, her expression intense. Daniel, we've already survived impossible things together. An investigation that should have destroyed us both. Coordinating a pregnancy and birth across 2 lives that didn't fit together. Building a family from pieces that shouldn't work but somehow do. This is just the next impossible thing. He thought about Maya and Emma growing up together, not divided between households, but united in one space. About coming home every night to both his daughters instead of just one. About Lena, brilliant and fierce and absolutely terrifying in her conviction that they could make this work. What about when one of us meets someone, he asked. When you or I want an actual relationship with someone else? Then we figure it out when it happens. We're adults, Daniel. We can set boundaries and respect them. The girls come first and everything else adjusts around that. It should have sounded cold, transactional. Instead, it sounded like the most honest thing anyone had ever offered him. A partnership built on respect and shared purpose instead of romance that could fade or fail. I need time to think about it, Daniel said finally. Take all the time you need, Lena said. But Daniel, think about what's actually best for the girls, not what's conventional or comfortable. We stopped being conventional the moment we closed that door in Vermont. Daniel spent the next week thinking about nothing else. He talked to Maya, asking carefully how she'd feel about living with Lena and Emma all the time. That would be so cool, Maya said immediately. Then I could see Emma every day, and Lena could teach me how to be smart like her, and we could be a real family instead of a sometimes family. We're already a real family, Bug. I know, but it would be more real if we all lived together, like on TV shows where everyone eats breakfast together and stuff. He talked to his mother, explaining the situation in careful terms that somehow made it sound both completely reasonable and absolutely insane. Let me understand this, she said slowly. You want to move in with a woman you're not dating to co-parent the baby you had together and your daughter from your previous relationship. When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous. Honey, it sounds ridiculous however you say it. His mother was quiet for a moment. But you know what? Maya's thriving. You're happier than you've been in years. And from what you've told me, this Lena is exactly the kind of steady presence you need in your life. So maybe it is ridiculous, but maybe ridiculous works for your family. You really think so? I think you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether it's crazy to live with someone you're not romantically involved with. The question is whether it's what's best for those 2 girls. And from everything you've told me, the answer is yes. He talked to Marcus Webb, who listened with the patient attention of someone who'd seen every possible family configuration in his 60-plus years. Unconventional doesn't mean wrong, Marcus said simply. I've seen traditional families destroy each other, and non-traditional families thrive. What matters is commitment, respect, and putting the children first. From what I've observed, you and Lena have all 3. Finally, he talked to Sarah Chen, the lawyer who'd helped them survive the investigation. You want my legal opinion or my personal opinion? Sarah asked. Both. Legally, I'd recommend a detailed cohabitation agreement covering finances, custody, what happens if one of you wants to move out, and every other contingency we can imagine. Personally, I think you'd be an idiot not to try this. You've already proven you can work together under the worst circumstances. Living together when you actually like each other should be easy by comparison. Armed with opinions and perspectives and his own growing certainty, Daniel finally made his decision. He showed up at Lena's condo on a Saturday morning with Maya in tow, both of them carrying boxes. Lena opened the door, Emma asleep against her shoulder, confusion crossing her face. "What's this?" "Maya's winter clothes," Daniel said, "and some of her books. Thought we'd start moving her stuff over since we'll need to figure out room arrangements." Understanding dawned slowly. "You're saying yes." "I'm saying yes on one condition." "What condition?" "We do this right. Legal agreements, clear boundaries, therapy to help us navigate complications as they come up. I'm not doing this halfway or hoping it works out. If we're building a family, we build it with proper foundations." Lena's smile was incandescent, transforming her entire face. "Deal. Come in. We have a lot to figure out." They spent the morning planning. Maya would get the second bedroom, big enough for all her things plus space to grow. Emma would start in the nursery they'd already set up, eventually moving to share with Maya when she was older, unless they found a bigger place. Daniel would take the study, converting it to a bedroom, maintaining the separate spaces they'd agreed on. Maya helped by offering constant commentary on color schemes and furniture placement, and which of her stuffed animals would live where. Emma woke up halfway through and demanded attention with the imperious cries of the very young, and somehow they managed to feed her and plan simultaneously, passing her between them while debating closet organization. "This is insane," Lena said at one point, surveying the chaos of boxes and baby gear and Maya's artistic interpretation of the floor plan drawn in crayon. "Completely insane," Daniel agreed. "Still want to do it?" "Absolutely." The actual move took 3 weeks of coordinating movers and furniture sales and Maya's increasingly excited countdowns. Daniel sold most of his furniture, keeping only what made sense for the new space. Lena bought a bigger dining table to accommodate 4 people instead of 1. They argued about kitchen organization and compromised on bathroom schedules and slowly, awkwardly, built a home that belonged to all of them. The first night they spent all together in the newly configured condo, Daniel stood in the kitchen at 2 a.m. with Emma in his arms while she worked through a bottle. The apartment was quiet except for her feeding sounds and the distant hum of traffic. Through the open doorways, he could see Maya's room where she slept surrounded by her relocated kingdom of stuffed animals, and Lena's room where she'd finally gotten a full night's sleep for the first time in weeks. "Your family's pretty weird, Emma," he whispered to his daughter. "But I think we're going to make it work." Emma's eyes were closing, milk-drunk and content. Daniel burped her carefully, then carried her back to the nursery, settling her in the crib with the elephant Maya had designated as her guardian. He stood there for a moment, watching her breathe, before heading back to his own room. He was almost asleep when his door opened quietly. Lena stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I just wanted to say thank you for taking a chance on this. On us." "We're not an us," Daniel said, but there was no heat in it. "We're some kind of us," Lena countered. "Maybe not the traditional kind, but an us nonetheless." She was right. They were something that didn't have a name yet, something built from necessity and choice and the accumulation of small moments of trust. Not a romance, but not a romance either. Something different, something their own. "Good night, Lena," Daniel said. "Good night, Daniel." She closed the door softly. Daniel lay in the darkness of his new room in this new home with his new family, and let himself believe completely that they'd actually pulled this off. Chugged. 6 months later, Daniel stood in the kitchen making pancakes, while Maya set the table with the careful concentration of someone who'd been given an important job. Emma was in her high chair, attempting to eat mashed banana with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Lena emerged from her morning run, sweaty and energized, stealing a piece of bacon off the cooling rack. "Hey, I'm making those for everyone," Daniel protested. "Consider it payment for not complaining about your coffee habit," Lena countered, but she was smiling. It was Saturday morning, their routine now. Daniel cooked breakfast, Lena cleaned up afterward, Maya helped Emma with the fine art of food consumption. They'd fallen into rhythms that felt natural, dividing labor without formal negotiations, anticipating each other's needs the way long-term partners did. People at work still ask questions sometimes, trying to understand their arrangement. Daniel had stopped trying to explain, just said they were co-parenting and let people make their own assumptions. Lena was more direct, telling anyone who asked that they were family, and that's all that mattered. Marcus Webb had been right about one thing. The gossip eventually died down. Other scandals emerged, other dramas took center stage. The firm's attention moved on, leaving them to build their lives without constant scrutiny. Emma took her first steps on a random Tuesday in April, lurching across the living room toward Maya, who was kneeling on the floor with her arms out. "Come on, Emma! You can do it!" Emma made it 3 wobbly steps before falling on her diaper-padded bottom, but the achievement was undeniable. She'd walked. Daniel grabbed his phone to record it, and Lena emerged from her home office where she'd been working to see what the commotion was about. "She walked," Maya announced proudly, as if she'd personally taught her sister this skill. 3 whole steps. "That's amazing," Lena said, scooping Emma up and spinning her around. "My brilliant girl." They celebrated with ice cream even though it was barely noon, all of them crammed onto the couch, while Emma smeared chocolate across her face and hands, and anything within reach. Maya documented the occasion with her tablet, taking approximately 40 pictures that were mostly blurry but captured the joy perfectly. That night, after both girls were asleep, Daniel and Lena sat on the balcony with wine, looking out at the city lights. "I've been thinking about something," Lena said quietly. "Dangerous habit," Daniel teased. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about what we call this, what we are to each other." Daniel felt his stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. They'd been so careful not to define it, not to pressure each other into labels that didn't fit. "Do we need to call it anything?" "Maybe." Maya's been asking questions. Someone at school asked if we're married, and she didn't know what to say. "What did you tell her?" "That we're family. That sometimes families look different from the ones in storybooks, but that doesn't make them less real." Lena turned to face him. "But I think she wants something more concrete. Kids like categories." "So what are you proposing?" "I'm not proposing anything dramatic. I just think we should acknowledge that this thing we're doing, it's working. We're good at it. Better than good." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not talking about romance or changing what we have. I'm talking about being honest that we're partners. In parenting, in life, in building this family, that we're committed to each other, even if that commitment looks different from traditional relationships." Daniel thought about the past year, about all the ways they'd shown up for each other, the midnight feedings and the terrible days at work, and the constant negotiation of sharing space and raising children. The way Lena had his coffee ready every morning without asking. The way he knew exactly how she liked her toast. The 1,000 small intimacies that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with deep, abiding partnership. "Partners," he said slowly. "I like that. It's honest." "It's what we are," Lena agreed. Maya's parents. Emma's parents. Partners in this completely unconventional family we've built. "To partnership, then," Daniel said, raising his wine glass. "To partnership," Lena echoed, clinking her glass against his. They sat in comfortable silence, and Daniel thought about how far they'd come from that night in the supply closet, from the pregnancy test and the investigation and all the impossible moments that had somehow led here, to this balcony, this partnership, this family that shouldn't work but did. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya, who'd apparently woken up and gotten access to Lena's tablet. The message was a selfie of her and Emma in Emma's crib, both of them grinning at the camera, with text that read, "Best sisters ever." Daniel showed the photo to Lena. She smiled, that soft expression she reserved for the girls, and pulled out her own phone to save a copy. "We should probably go rescue Emma before Maya decides they need a midnight adventure," Daniel said. "Probably," Lena agreed, but neither of them moved immediately, both savoring this moment of peace before returning to the beautiful chaos of their lives. When they finally went inside, they found both girls asleep in Emma's crib, Maya's arm wrapped protectively around her sister, Emma's hand fisted in Maya's pajama top. They looked at each other, communicating silently the way they'd learned to do over months of coordinating 2 children's needs. "Leave them?" Lena whispered. "Leave them," Daniel agreed. They covered the girls with a blanket, turned on the nightlight, and retreated to their separate rooms. But before Daniel closed his door, Lena called softly from her own doorway. Daniel, I'm really glad you didn't run. That first night, when I showed you the test, I'm glad you stayed. Me too, Daniel said honestly. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Lena corrected. The best was saying yes to living here, to choosing this family. You're right, Daniel said. That was the best decision. He went to bed in his room in the home they'd built together, listening to the soft sounds of his daughters sleeping down the hall and Lena settling in her own space. It wasn't the life he'd imagined when he stood in that doorway 10 months ago, staring at two pink lines. It was better, stranger, more complicated, and more right than anything he could have predicted. The door they'd closed that first night had opened onto this. This family, this partnership, this completely unconventional life that worked because they'd all chosen it day after day through every impossible moment. And lying there in the darkness, Daniel understood with absolute certainty that he'd keep choosing it, keep choosing them, for as long as they'd have him. Outside, the city moved through its rhythms, indifferent to the small miracle of this family. But inside, in this home built from trust and necessity and accumulated moments of grace, everything was exactly as it should be. Imperfect, unconventional, and absolutely, undeniably theirs. In the nursery, Emma stirred and made soft baby sounds. Maya murmured something in her sleep, tightening her protective hold. And in their separate rooms, Daniel and Lena both smiled in the darkness, listening to their daughters breathe, grateful for the impossible choices that had brought them all here. The door was closed now, not in secrecy, but in certainty. This was their family, their choice, their future. And it was enough.